Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Introducing GENESYS 3.0, Boost Performance in the World of Open Architecture. My name is Katie, Communications Manager at Vitech, and I will be your host during today's webinar, presented by Warren Smith. We're excited to share with you our newest product, GENESYS 3.0. GENESYS was first released in October of 2011 and has served the systems engineering community as the only fully integrated tool available serving MBSE practitioners in an open environment. Today, GENESYS is better than ever, and things have been very busy here at Vitech getting ready to provide this premier experience for engineering teams. Our lead presenter today is Warren Smith, Senior Account Executive here at Vitech and a Senior Systems Engineer. He has over 25 years' experience working on all aspects of systems engineering and project management, and has worked extensively in both the military aerospace and commercial industries. He has deep knowledge of systems engineering and model-based systems engineering tools. Warren is often found presenting at local and COSI chapter meetings, as well as national conferences. In addition, we have customer care specialist Bethany Maddox with us here today. You may recognize Bethany from our customer exclusive webinar series or from the other end of the phone at our support desk. Before Warren and Bethany get started, I have just a few housekeeping items. We will be answering questions at the end of the webinar today. Please send your questions in as soon as you think of them through the question tab on your webinar control panel. Warren and Bethany will answer as many questions as they can today, but if we don't get to your question, we will reach out to you after the webinar. The webinar is being recorded today, so if you experience connection problems during the live presentation, a recording will be available by request within 24 hours of the live version. The recording will be published to Vitech's webinar archive located on our website. I will send out the link in the chat window. I'm now going to turn the presentation over to Warren. Welcome.
Thank you, Katie, and welcome everyone to this webinar. We're going to go through some of the new features that we've introduced in GENESYS 3.0. For those of you who may have been to some of these series in the past, GENESYS is a tool that is developed in an open architecture. It's a .NET-based infrastructure on a SQL Server. And with GENESYS 3.0, we've done a lot to bring the capabilities of GENESYS in line with some of our other tools. So we're going to talk about half dozen or so new benefits today. We have a new interface with Microsoft Excel incorporated into GENESYS. It's unique to that tool, and it offers tremendous capabilities for dashboards and a broader user experience. We also have added design parameters, which will be important with the reuse models, which you've seen in the previous versions of GENESYS. We've introduced model design diagnostics. So now you can reduce your integration time and increase your design quality by having the tool tell you where design omissions exist in your model. We want to provide the best user experience in the industry for diagramming, and we've come a long way with this version. So we have new capabilities in the diagramming palette that will enhance that user experience dramatically. We've added the DOORS connector to GENESYS, and by doing so, we are able to help our customers that have legacy investment in that tool take advantage and integrate the DOORS requirements in with the rest of their systems engineering work. And then finally, we've added a lot of performance and scalability improvements to GENESYS 3.0. So what this does is it broadens somewhat the base of users who should be starting out with GENESYS. And we'll be talking more about that as we go through. Now, perhaps one of the most exciting features that we've added to GENESYS is the new connector with Excel. Some of you are familiar from our previous webinars last summer with our use of Core for exporting data from the model for getting project dashboards. So we've taken that concept, and with GENESYS 3.0, we've expanded that. But what we did is we started with it not as a push from GENESYS, but rather as a pull from Excel. So if you have a Genesys login, but not Genesys natively or a Genesys user, you can sit at Excel and pull data about your project straight into the tool. How did we do this? Well, we've added a Genesys add-on onto the Excel ribbon, and when you get that add-on in, you can see that you have Genesys login capabilities, the ability to access different types of data, different classes of data, to sort, filter, and of course you can generate and the queries and load the data. Now we have two different ways of accessing Excel data, Genesys data from Excel. First is that we can examine data, and we have a number of canned views that we've predefined that allow you to generate those dashboards that I mentioned earlier automatically. And we have a nice set of built-in dashboards that allow your program managers or your lead systems engineers to see exactly what the state of the design is objectively, not subjectively, directly from the tool. We also have the ability to do ad hoc queries, so ad hoc views of the data with custom queries, applying your Genesys filters and sorts, and then of course you can pull out custom dashboards as well. So what this does is it gives those people on your project team who need to see what the state of the design is, how many of the requirements are implemented or tested and so forth. To see that information, they can sit at their Microsoft Office application in Excel and see that data. Here's an example of what this looks like. Bethany's going to show us how this works in a minute, but I thought I might dwell on this and kind of give you an idea of the richness of capability that you're going to have with this new interface. So, as I mentioned before, here's the Genesys ribbon, and we've pulled data out. She'll show us how that works, but here's the result. Here we have a requirements pie chart. It shows that there are 35 requirements total in this particular system, and of those requirements you can see that some percentage of them are constraint, 9%, almost half of them, the orange ones, are functional, how many performance, and so on and so forth. So you can get a snapshot of the different types of data. Now this one focuses on requirements. We have other dashboards that focus on other types of things. But one of the things I like about this is that over on the right, it shows that the requirements themselves are being implemented and incorporated into the design activity. So a list of requirements really is a to-do list, if you will. Here's a list of things that features, capabilities that my system must perform or satisfy. So in order to do that, requirements have to be allocated to behaviors, to architectures, and so forth. This pie chart over here on the right shows in the blue that 40% of those requirements have been used to drive functions of the system. And another 11% have been used in the orange to specify specific components. But that leaves 49%, the gray area, of those requirements, the to-do list of your system design activity, if you will, unallocated, unimplemented. So from this one dashboard presented in Excel, generated very easily, as Bethany will show in a few minutes, you can get a snapshot of the completeness of your design. Now, I don't know how many people who are listening to my voice today have had to develop status charts for design activities. Sometimes they're quad charts in Excel, that kind of thing. But usually, in my experience, it involves going around and asking different people the state of their design activity. It's very subjective, and it has to be done on a weekly basis often, and it's very time-consuming. Imagine what you'll save if you have these types of objective dashboards with real numbers showing your design completeness, in this case requirements, implemented requirements, available anytime you open up your Microsoft Office Excel and click on a button. Now this table at the bottom is really exciting. Many of our customers want to see the rate of change of particular pieces of data. You know, I don't want to know what the state of the requirements are. I want to know how many I added in the last week, or how many I changed, or architectural elements. How much did my design change over the last 30 or 7 days? Well, if you look at this, you'll see timestamps across the bottom, and you'll see a numeric number of change along the y-axis. So what this shows is that at the beginning of the project over here, we had some new requirements, blue or new requirements, added to the program. And then we had a long period of time where nothing new was added. Then we had a little blip, and then near the end, we see that the number of additions has really decreased, but people are starting to change or update the requirements. So by doing this, you can get a sense of the pace of operations of different elements of your design. And with this kind of a report, you'll see at the beginning a lot of requirements work, you'll see a lot of design work in the middle. That'll start to taper off as the test behavior, test aspects of the program start up. So these dashboards are going to be extremely helpful to our GENESYS users, just as they have been for our core users. We also have the ability to do custom queries from Excel. We have the ability to start from any place, so you can start with your architecture. You can start with your behavior or your testing. You can even start with your programmatic elements. People forget that in GENESYS you can manage things like work breakdown structures and program activities. You can start with your risks, and you can report out on any attributes that are of interest to you, and you can actually traverse relationships within the model and get out, say, all of the functions or behavior that's been allocated to your architecture. Or one of my favorites is you can get out a list of all the data items that are transferred on different interfaces, and you can do your interface assessments that way. So there's a lot that you can do with the ad hoc querying capability from Excel. Now, the second aspect of the Excel interface, besides examining data, is actually making changes. And we'll see this live here in a minute. But we have this handy little load button over here, so that if you do make edits or changes to the data that you've pulled out of Excel, into Excel, you can round trip that back into GENESYS. What this does essentially is give people a fourth capability, a fourth view of their engineering, model-based systems engineering data. In addition to the property sheets, the diagrams, and the web access that GENESYS supports, now you can also get a view of your data in Excel and then round trip that back. Bethany, would you show everyone, please, how easy it is to use this interface?
It's my pleasure, Warren. We'll give Warren just a minute to pass control over to me, and then I'll show my screen. While he does that, I will just mention for a minute that this is an example of how we've chosen to leverage the API in GENESYS. Since we first released GENESYS, we talked about how powerful this was going to be. And this is the first connector we've built to show you and to leverage that and to give you something out of the box that you can go ahead and start using right away without needing any development time. So I do have a GENESYS repository here on my computer, so we're just going to minimize that because I don't need it right now. And I'm going to open Excel and just do that to a blank workbook. And then you'll notice the GENESYS tab here. All of these are grayed out because I'm not yet logged in. Here's the very familiar GENESYS login screen. And it'll take it just a minute to log in and then show me my projects. Right here I can get a list of all the projects that are in my repository. Let's go ahead and take a look at that geospatial library. Now that I've selected my project, I can begin my query. And if I want to do a really simple query, say, show me all requirements, I can do that right here, just by dropping down the class, selecting what I want, and clicking the load button. I want to show you for a moment something a little bit more. And so to do that, we'll click the Show All Options button. And this gives you the panel on the right for the query that Warren had shown in his slide. So let's run a quick query. This one's not going to be too complicated. We'll bring up the function class. Now there's a lot in the function class, and there's several in subfolders. So I want to look at just the root folder. I can include or exclude subfolders right here. So let's exclude those. And then I can show you what attributes I want to load into my table. So I'm going to look at the description and begin logic and end logic. And then I can go to the relations and I can select any that are valid. As a matter of fact, it's only going to show me, I think, valid ones. So let's click on allocated to, and then it automatically selects the target class. If there's more than one target class, I can drop that down and select those as well. I can also have a lot of other options. I can apply a filter from Genesys. Any of the Genesys filters you'll find right here. Same for any of the sort blocks you have established. These are the prepackaged ones, and if you did a custom one, you can access them here as well. So once I've fully defined my query, I just click the load button. Now, anytime you load data, you're going to see this, this warning. Just to let you know, anything on the sheet you're looking at is going to get deleted. So make sure you're happy with that. If not, you can change the sheet setting over here and create a new sheet. I'm happy, so we'll click yes. And it takes just a moment, and there's our data. Now, we mentioned this is a two-way thing. And, you know, I talk to a lot of folks on the support desk, and they want to work in a table view. Maybe they're working on setting some descriptions or the number attributes, and they need a table just to do that most efficiently. And this is exactly how you do that with Genesys, by leveraging the Excel connector. So let's show you really quick. Let's push some data back. I'm just going to enter some text, and then publish my changes back to Genesys. Be really careful which publish button you use. The publish all will overwrite all of these in Genesys. Everything I have in my table will overwrite. If you're working collaboratively, that could be dangerous. So I'm just going to push publish changes. And it takes just a moment, and there it is. Let me pop into Genesys and prove it. And there's my text. So it really is that fast and that easy. Now, if we're working with more data, it'll take just a moment longer to load more data, but it's super easy to do. If you can use Excel, you can use this connector. It's so intuitive. Now, Warren also talked about the dashboards, and I want to show you just how easy those are as well. And we have a list of dashboards for you. You can drop that down and select the couple that we already have. Let's take a look at that requirements dashboard, and let's allow Genesys to create a new sheet in my workbook. We'll click the load button, let it work for just a moment, and we'll have a dashboard. And there it is. This is the same dashboard Warren had in his PowerPoint slide. They really are that easy. Now, if I want to share this with a coworker, this is all in Excel. I can save the Excel file and send it off, and that person does not need Genesys access to view the spreadsheet. It does get into Excel and become Excel data once you've saved it to an I can't remember that file extension. So once you've changed it, you've saved it as an Excel file, you can share it or put it on SharePoint or wherever you want. That's all I had for my demonstration, Warren, so I will send it back over to you.
Actually, before you do that, I'm going to go off our plan a little bit. I think that we got a question that just about Genesys in general. If you wouldn't mind, would you just pop back to Genesys for just a second?
I'd love to.
We'll spend a couple of minutes giving people a little bit of an overview of the tool itself, since we haven't done that up to this point. When you look at Genesys, the screen that she has open here, it shows a list of all the different types of data on the left side that you can maintain in your systems engineering model. And if you can highlight a couple of these, you can see that the component class there identifies all the architectural elements that you would keep in your system model. The function class and the state class, which we'll be talking about, we'll keep all the behavior elements that you're going to have in your model. Requirements are captured in the requirements area, and then test information is captured in the verification requirements as well. And there's other types of test information, but those are the key ones. And the thing that's important about Genesys is that it is an integrated tool. every single member of your project team, whether they are a systems engineer or a test engineer or even a detailed design engineer or manager, is able to view all the related data that exists in this integrated tool. And if you click on any one of any element in here, and I don't know if you want to, which class you might want to pick, but you'll be able to see details about each of these pieces of data. So you'll be able to see the diagramming, the textual description, the various relationships that this has with other pieces. If you want to switch over to a diagram again, that'd be great. So this is an actual functional model of the function that is highlighted from that function class. And we have the richness within Genesys to integrate all of this different data all together. So today with Genesys 3 rollout, we're really focusing in on the new capabilities. But because of the question, I just wanted to take a moment and highlight this for people. Do you have anything else that we should mention, Bethany?
I think that's it for now.
Okay, let's go ahead and we'll go back to our presentation. Okay. The second new capability in Genesys 3 that we wanted to talk about is probably one of the most important ones that we've added to the tool. It's auto-checking your model with the design diagnostics. The benefit of having a true model-based systems engineering platform for your development environment is that the model can answer questions about your design for you. Many people, I think, in the audience have seen this type of chart before. This is the cost of correcting defects as you progress through your development phases. So it's very inexpensive to make a change to your design when you're working here in analysis. Whether, no matter what kind of tool you're using, you just make some changes in your diagrams, some changes in your text, and it's very inexpensive. If a design defect, however, is missed, and it's missed during analysis and it gets through the design implementation phase, it will certainly be manifested somewhere out here in integration and testing and fielding. But you can see that the cost of correcting a defect way down here in the design is really expensive. It's orders of magnitude more expensive than fixing it if you can find it in analysis. Now, when I first started working with tools, the question I always had was, how do you find a defect during analysis? I mean, how do you know before you have the system built that you have a defect in your design? And with design diagnostics, Vitech has answered that question. What we've done in Genesys is we've put in a design omission detector. Basically, it's a series of checks on the relationships that all those elements that we talked about just a moment ago have in the model. So there's three different types of checks. There's design completeness checks, which make sure that, for instance, every function is being performed in the architecture, or that every requirement has a test, that kind of thing. We have design integrity checks, and the design integrity checks verify that all the different levels of your model are consistent. So if you have something coming in at a subsystem level, well, guess what? It should be processed inside that subsystem at the assembly level. And so we have a check for that too. And you can see over here in the picture the completeness and the integrity error windows. And in this case, we have a very good model because all checks have passed. We also have a third area where you can have user rules. These rules can be developed using our open architecture language. So it's just a standard programming language that comes along with all .NET framework type tools. We have over 70 checks built in, but if you want to add your own, you can, for instance, make sure if you're in space space programs, for instance, that all components have a mass, or do units checks and so forth. One of the things we've added to the GENESYS diagnostics check is we've made it tunable. We've added 3 levels of checks so that as you start out, you aren't burdened with hundreds of errors at a detailed level when you really just haven't gotten there in the design. So you can have kind of a gross level check and then that very fine detailed check, and then we have one in the middle. Now, what we've discovered in this type of capability, the ability to find unimplemented requirements or dangling interfaces or missing architecture or functions, is that you're going to save in your, just by running this check on your design, you're going to save upwards of 50% of your integration costs. Almost half of your integration costs typically come from these types of mistakes. GENESYS has the ability to find them. And you can do it on the fly. You can be working on a piece of your architecture and you think, geez, am I missing anything? And you click on this little button and it will tell you, oh yeah, you're missing an interface. Oh, great, thanks. Let me fix that. You can also generate formal reports that will give you a list of all of those different types of consistent completeness and completeness and integrity checks. So it'll find missing interfaces and functionality. It'll tell you, hey, we're missing descriptions, which is important for the documents that are generated out of GENESYS. You can find things like data items that have been defined but are not used, and so on and so forth. So the GENESYS Design Diagnostics capability has been added. It brings it up to the level that Core had and actually surpasses it in some regards with the levels, the tunable levels of check. The next thing I'd like to talk about is our design parameters. We've added parametric data to each of the classes in GENESYS. So this is really neat because what it does is it gives you the ability to define elements with parametric data that will be output based upon the values that you want for that one element. You can see here the format. We use this bracketed format. These parameters, which are captured on another screen, are actually automatically inserted into the descriptions. So here you can see this last sentence says the workstation reliability shall be blank. Well, it's pulling the reliability value from the parameter in the other window in the tool. So in this case, it's going to show that the reliability is 99.5%. Well, when we output this requirement into a document, what you'll see is just the number. You won't see any of the brackets or this the name of the parameter or anything like that. You'll just see the number, and if it has units, it'll show the units. And you can see that you can just edit these in place, that kind of thing. What's the benefit of this? Well, people are beginning to use GENESYS and Core for their reuse libraries, and they're very powerful. I've demonstrated the capability to do that in previous webinars, including the GENESYS 2 webinar. We built a model from a reuse library. And the reuse libraries can have populated models that include requirements and architecture and behavior and tests. But now you can also actually have annotations within those reusable elements that are based upon the parameters. So you can have a reusable element that can have a range of parameters, and you can bring it in and set the parameters for the application that you're going to apply that reusable element to. So adding the design parameter capability into GENESYS 3 has really stepped up the game for GENESYS for reuse libraries. We've added state transition models. This brings the GENESYS capability on par with a Core capability. And now when you do upgrade from Core to GENESYS, you'll be able to bring your state models across as well. The state modeling is just as you would expect. It provides relationships between the states, the events, the transitions, and so forth. But one of the things that we do that I think is exciting and innovative is that we have a good relationship between the system functions and the states that they execute in. So if you look inside any one of these states, what you'll see is a list of the functions that are available when the system is in that state. We also have states related to operational activities. So if you're performing, say, DODAF or other type of operational domain models instead of system domain, and you're showing how different things interact in the real world to accomplish capabilities or missions, well then we now have a relationship between those operational activities and the states that they operate in. Obviously, we align with SysML. We're hierarchical, so that if you drill inside any one of these states, you'll see a series of substates, and all the basic rules apply with regard to transitions and so forth. So the state modeling Genesis is really exciting. Now, one of the things that we've wanted to do with our Genesis framework is to make the diagramming capability the very best that's available. And with Genesis 3.0, we've really come a really long way to doing that. We've added various ways to control your diagramming inside of Genesis. People may remember Genesis 2.0, we had the pan window, and it was really, really nice. But now with 3.0, we've added visual cues so that you can see very clearly when you drag and drop an element off of the diagramming palette, if you're going to add a node to a model, where it's going to land. We've added the All Entities tab so that when you're making relationships between, say, allocating a function to a component or making relating a risk to the requirement that causes that risk, well, we've added so you can make all of those relationships graphically. It's very, very easy to do. We've added in things like nudging, snap alignment so that things align very quickly and easily, and we've added grid support. In the area of richness, we've actually added a number of different new capabilities. First, we've added generic shapes. So if you want your nodes to be the standard kind of rounded corner blocks that is the out-of-the-box shape, you can do that. But if you want to add other shapes, generic shapes to them, you can now assign them. You can add graphics to the nodes. And in this picture here, you can see a diagram where each one of these nodes on the architecture model has had graphics assigned to it, so it's clear to see who the operator is, what the satellite is, and so on and so forth. In fact, we have customers that use this capability to clean up the, not just clean up, but make the diagrams presentable to the point where their design reviews they perform out of our tools, rather than spending a lot of time generating PowerPoint charts for their design reviews. They annotate the appropriate diagrams inside of our tools, and Genesis supports this, and then actually brings up the tool and presents it to the customer. What that allows is in the design review, if they want to explore any details, you can just navigate around. But it eliminates the time that's spent generating charts, and it also ensures that the review, the materials presented at the review are the same as the materials in the model. So it's very exciting to have this capability. If you're going to do this, of course, you need to have a good library of graphics, and you can see an example here. We have a very extensive graphics library now that provide all sorts of out-of-the-box graphics that you can use. Of course, you can use your own JPEGs and so forth, and just word photographs, whatever you want to add in. We've also added opacity to the controls. So now you can come in and you can add colors to your nodes, but you can make them opaque as well. In the area of utility, one of my favorite drawing features is that we have the ability to mouse over any of these and get details. So instead of having to double click on a node to see what the description is, for instance, you can just hover over it and up pops this little red box here. It's highlighted in red. It pops up the name and the number and the description. We can also insert notes. We can control the front and back order of where things show. We've added pan and zoom control, and in order to help you with all these new capabilities that we have, we've added some settings, some preferences, so you can decide how you like it and then save that. Bethany, if you're still on, you've used this extensively, haven't you?
I sure have.
What's been your experience with the drawing capabilities?
Well, I made a lot of the screenshots for the What's New document, for the help files, and I have just found that I can get my diagrams looking good faster. And that's what I love about it. It's easy and fast and intuitive above all. You know, we're pretty adamant that our tools are not drawing tools, but sometimes we need to make the pictures look good, especially when you need to present something. And when you need to make a picture look good, this is so easy to use. You know, I drag something, maybe I'm trying to align two nodes. Well, instead of using alignment commands, I just drag them and get them kind of close, and some alignment bars will pop up and I release it and it snaps in. It's just really that simple. It's very intuitive. If you've used any kind of drawing tool, I mean, PowerPoint does this stuff, and that's probably on the lower end of what one might draw in, and it's just really simple and intuitive.
That's awesome. Yeah, we really do want our drawing capability to be best in class. So I think we've come a long way to achieving that with GENESYS 3.0. So let's see. Okay, well, one of the last features I want to talk about before we move on to the performance is our IBM DOORS connector. We are an IBM Rational partner for the development of our connectors with DOORS, and GENESYS has been developed to take advantage of the OSLC interface. It is bidirectional. And you can see here this on the screenshot of GENESYS. We have little buttons for doing import and export, and we've designed it to support 3 different operational scenarios. Of course, there are others as well, but we made sure that we were able to handle the 3 primary ways that people want to use their legacy data in DOORS and share that with their system design data in GENESYS. The first approach is to have GENESYS do the operational analysis and requirements generation. So GENESYS has many modeling capabilities. You've seen the graphical capabilities, but you can identify how your system will operate in its environment, and then from that derive the system requirements. So that type of operational analysis is something that GENESYS is fantastic at. And you can take that operational analysis and derive your requirements, your literally system requirements for use in your system design. And of course in GENESYS you can take those requirements and then drive down all your functional behavior. You can do all your sequence diagrams and your activity diagrams and so forth. You can do all of your derivation and testing and architecture. But you can also take those and you can move those into say a DOORS authoritative repository. So many of our customers have DOORS. They have DOORS deployed. They want to use that as the source for the final results of all the analysis they're going to do in GENESYS. So in order to do that, then they would hit the export button after they've generated their requirements and then their operational analysis in GENESYS, hit the export button, and that information will go over into DOORS via the OSLC interface, and they can maintain the output of all that activity inside of DOORS. Now, we also have a third scenario rather, which is the DOORS is the initial requirement source. Oftentimes, we will get requirements from DOORS, and we'll want to import those, and then do our system analysis and design, maybe derive additional requirements, maybe identify some changes to those original DOORS requirements based upon the analysis and design that they're doing inside of GENESYS. Well, we can bring those requirements in using the import, but we can also round trip them. So when changes are made inside of the analysis, the GENESYS analysis models, we can round trip those changes directly back out into DOORS. So this is a very exciting addition to our interface. We're using OSLC, which is great, and we're very happy with the way this has worked out. Now I'm going to cover really just one more topic, and then we can ask some questions. The last topic is in performance and scalability. So as I mentioned before, GENESYS is built on a .NET framework over a SQL Server. We have a fantastic collaborative edition where you can have 5 people work collaboratively together on a common shared repository without having to add the GENESYS server. But then beyond 5 people, you can add the GENESYS server and really scale up. What we've done with performance improvements here is that we've added 64-bit machine support to GENESYS. Obviously, GENESYS is always run on those machines, but it was running kind of in the 32-bit mode. But that is now native on all of the machines. It also increases the maximum capability, RAM capability, that you can have on your machine to a value much higher than you can actually put into your machine. So we make maximum use of RAM, which means better performance. We've enhanced the capabilities in the simulation, the performance improvements in the simulation capabilities. So GENESYS, as you know, has the ability to simulate any of your analysis models, your functional models, your activity models, test activities, and so forth. Well, with the simulation, there was a little bit of a delay in loading and resetting those simulations, and that's been greatly reduced in GENESYS 3.0. We've also increased the database load time and access time to all the various elements in the model. What this means is that you can now use larger databases in your GENESYS models. Pardon me. What the effect of this is that there's always been a group of users or customers that would be appropriate to start with GENESYS. That's been that group of customers has been limited by perhaps some of the features of GENESYS before now, and also by some of the scalability of the tool. The addition of many of the features that you've seen today brings it up to par in many of the areas with core. Not all of them in terms of features, but gosh, all the big ones are really pretty much right there. These performance improvements also broaden the number of customers that would be appropriate for starting out with GENESYS. Now, of course, all of our core customers will eventually be able to move, well, can move at any time, but will eventually move over to GENESYS some point in the future. But what we'll do is, now that GENESYS 3.0 is out, the scalability is much better, but it's not going to handle the same some of the very large databases that we have in core yet. So as we go through and you're curious about GENESYS, we can certainly assess whether or not the scalability is to the point where it would be appropriate to move you over or not yet. So that's what I have for the presentation of getting started and what's new in GENESYS 3.0. Katie, do we have any questions?
We have a bunch of questions. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So thank you so much, Warren and Bethany. Thank you so much to our participants. And if you still have some questions, you can still get those in using the questions tab on your webinar control panel. So for the first question, I know that you touched on this a little bit, but Keith would like, and actually a bunch of others would also like, a general description of the differences between core and GENESYS. I don't know
Okay.
if Bethany or Warren want to answer that one.
I'm
Go
happy
ahead.
to take it.
Yeah, why don't you take that?
We have actually refrained from putting out there a document that says this is what's in each one. And the reason is that our most pressing concern is to fully meet your needs. And you are an expert in your needs, but we are an expert in our software. So we've chosen not to put that out there so that we can have a one-on-one conversation with you. If you're a new customer, our sales account executives will talk to you about that. If you're an existing customer, you can give me a call on the support desk and I can walk you through that. Just one or two high-level things that I'll go ahead and mention, things that I found are really important to people, is the first one is reports. Core comes with a lot of reports that are very mature and they're packaged and they're ready to go. Genesys, because it's newer, we don't have that robust library yet. We're working on building it and we're letting those out a few at a time, but the library is not as robust. So if you really rely upon our packaged reports in Core, you should stay there for now. Another thing is the IDEF 0. Genesys does not have that right now, nor do we intend to put it in. And so if you rely upon the IDEF 0, again, Core is your best bet. On the other hand, go ahead, Genesys. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Warren. I almost said go ahead,
What I was going to
Genesys.
say is that I think that in this release, the Excel interface is the biggest feature that Genesys has that Core does not have.
Yes, it does. Now Core has that CSV import tool, an export tool that's really powerful and really great. But actually working in Excel is an entirely different thing. So the really slick connectors to Doors and to Excel are really some great powerful uses of the Genesys API. That Genesys API, hands down, is the #1 reason to choose Genesys. If you have a need that's current right now to connect Genesys to another tool and have a two-way data exchange, then we really want to talk to you about all of the other differences, because that API is super powerful, and we find it right now to be the primary reason to go that way.
All right. Yeah. In fact, I'm glad you pointed that out. You can round trip in Core as well through a spreadsheet. So I didn't want to suggest that you couldn't do that. You can do that in Core. You can export the dashboards and so forth, but it's not using API. It's not a pull from Excel, which is really what Genesys has done.
Right.
What's next, Katie?
All right, we've got a question from Gregory. He's asking, in the Excel connector, how would you manage multi-user changes from being moved into Genesys? I think he's asking if you have lots of people who are working in the Excel connector.
Yeah. Shall I handle that one?
If you want to, or I can. The short answer is versioning.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to expand on what that is?
Go ahead.
Okay. Genesys supports what we call versioning, and that is that anytime you make a change on an attribute, it's going to show you the current one. But there's a little browser button on the side, and if you click on that browser button, it will show you all of the previous versions of that attribute. So, and it'll tell you who made them, the timestamps and everything, and they'll be ordered by timestamp. So let's say Warren and I both pull data on the component class and we both make changes. And then when we commit, we both commit and maybe we overwrote each other. Well, the general rule is last one in wins. The good news is that your versions will be saved in that versioning browser. So if I overwrote Warren and he looks in there and says, I don't think that's what I set, he can look at that versioning browser and see that it was me who overwrote him, and to restore his if he wants to. So the versioning capability, which we released in a previous version of Genesys, will help manage that for you.
Right. Yeah, the history, the audit history that Bethany's talking about is really key at that. Now, if you're going to export data from Genesys into a spreadsheet and then hustle that spreadsheet around your organization for a week, you may want to take a look before you re-import that data back in, but you will have a history of everything that's changed. I foresee two different types of uses of this. One is there will be a lot of users, I think, that I'm sitting down, I could use Genesys, or I could pull the data out in Excel, edit it myself, and then post it back in. It's kind of a single session use. It will be in and out over the course of, say, an hour or two. And the chances are I'm working in an area of the model where probably other people are not. And you won't run into situations where you want to look at that history log, although it's there. If you have situations where you want to have lots of people edit the exact same spreadsheet, then obviously you need to manage that just like you would any other piece of data that you were going to have multiple users editing.
All right. This is a hopefully pretty quick question. I'll direct this one towards Bethany. What is the minimum version of Microsoft Office needed for the Excel connector to work?
You're right, that is an easy and quick one. The oldest version that is supported for our Excel connector is 2010. So it then just supports the two versions, 2010 and I think 2013, which is what we run here in the office, but both of them, because they have the ribbon, will work.
Okay, great. And then also in the Excel connector, is the pull-down menu able to show custom attributes, or is it just a standard list?
You bet all your custom schema changes will be able to be pulled by that query box. So if you've even added a new class, that class can be pulled by the query.
Okay, great. Now moving on to a question about the diagramming tools. We've got someone who's interested in knowing, are the preferences saved by the diagram, or are they general to all of the diagrams?
Both. is the short answer. There are some preferences you can set on a project level, and then all of those will populate to all of your diagrams. So, you know, if I want to take the footer off of all of my diagrams, that would be a project level preference. However, once I've pushed some of those down, I can then go into the diagram. Each diagram itself has some options that you can save on an individual diagram level. And so I won't get into the nitty-gritty of which is which, but it's on both levels.
Okay, thanks. We've got a question from David. He's asking, can I browse and edit my model using Chrome or Firefox's HTML5?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll take that one. Well, we have a web access capability, which is used with the GENESYS server, and using that you can not only just browse, but you can navigate the diagrams. You can see all the different elements, and you can actually review and comment. So you can't create diagrams, but you can go in and you can say, gosh, you know, this element here has this description or that attribute, and I want to change that, and then you can change it through your browser. And of course, any change that's made has got the audit history.
Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and put myself out there and potentially pronounce these terms incorrectly. But we've got another question. Do you have connectors to JAMA for requirements or Atlassian for issues?
I'll go ahead and take this one. We have not built those. However, through the GENESYS API, it is likely that you could build one if you use those tools.
Yeah, what's the visual? What's the GENESYS API? The GENESYS API language?
.NET.
Yeah, and then you can write in Visual Basic as well. So it's very easy to access across the .NET framework any custom interfaces, build custom interfaces, access data that you want out of that. And that really is the open architecture that we mentioned on the first slide for GENESYS.
And I will add that this version of GENESYS is shipping with a getting started guide for API, so that will be there. Okay, so we've got a question from Keith. He's asking, is there a capability to periodically synchronize requirements between DOORS and GENESYS? And if so, can one tool be defined as the master?
Yeah, I'll take that one. The answer, Keith, is yes, you can. And we have those three scenarios I talked about anticipates that you can have one or the other tool to be the master repository with changes coming in and being assessed and incorporated from the other tool. You can round trip it, and you can go both directions. So absolutely. The question is yes, you can, and you can keep them both in sync.
All right, we've got time for one more question, and I believe this one will be directed towards Warren. It's from Kenneth, and he would like you to elaborate on the program management, such as the work breakdown structure, and that integration with the system engineering capabilities. So to elaborate, he's asking about managing the systems engineering process.
Yeah. So, um, so essentially, the first thing that's really important is that program managers need to be able to get information out about the state of the program. And so, inside of with capabilities to get the dashboard information out, you can get accurate reporting of the state of your design. We showed the ones in the dashboard about the requirements and how many of those requirements were of different type, how many have been implemented in the design and how many haven't. What you can do is you can use these metrics over time to more effectively manage your efforts. Now, you can also use the tool to keep track of other types of information. So if you wanted to, you could keep track of, say, organizational charts or breakdown type information and use that to assess the impact of changes in your architecture on programmatic elements. And because of the nature of GENESYS, you can actually have custom annotations, so you can have custom data in all of these classes, and in fact even have custom classes that would relate programmatic elements like program activities or work breakdown structures or organizational charts to aspects of your architecture. This is very extensively used in core and is certainly can be done in GENESYS as well.
Okay, thank you so much to both of you. That wraps up our questions and answers for today's presentation. I know that there was a couple we couldn't get to. We will reach out to you after the webinar. If you have any other questions or comments for Warren or Bethany, please don't hesitate to shoot either of them an email. Their addresses are up on your screen. They'd be happy to hear from you with any inquiries you may have. In addition, you can post your questions or comments in the forum of our community site at community.vitechcorp.com or on Vitech Corporation's LinkedIn group page. I'm going to chat out the link to the community page. And thank you so much to everybody for coming today. We hope that you're as excited as we are about the next generation of Vitech products and services. Our next webinar is going to be focusing on using core in compliance environments. We're seeing more and more industries see the value of using core to ensure compliance with regulations, and we'll be walking you through some of the best practice methodologies for those environments. Keep an eye on your inbox in early May for the invitation for that webinar. We do have just one more note for today. At the conclusion of this webinar, a survey is going to open on your screen. Please take a moment to give us feedback on today's presentation or give us some information on what kinds of topics you'd like to see covered in future webinars. So that's all for today, and I hope everybody has a wonderful afternoon. Thanks.